There is a myth older than civilization that nobody teaches you is about you. In ancient Greece, a centaur named Chiron was struck by a poisoned arrow forged by the gods themselves. The wound it left could not heal, not because the wound was too deep, but because Chiron was immortal. The pain would not end. The injury would not close. And yet, here is the part of the myth that echoes through centuries and arrives tonight at your door. Chiron became the greatest healer the ancient world had ever known, not despite his wound, through it. He could not cure himself, but he could cure everyone else. And he spent the remainder of his eternal life doing exactly that. Carl Jung recognized this pattern and gave it a name. He called it the wounded healer archetype. And he understood, with the precision of someone who had lived inside his own wounding, that this archetype does not visit casually. It arrives in the lives of specific people, the ones who were broken in a particular way, at a particular depth, at a particular moment in their development, and who responded to that breaking not by closing, but by opening wider. You know who those people are. You may be watching this because you are one. The empath who carries everyone's pain did not choose this role. They were initiated into it, by a childhood that required them to feel what was not said, by a home that needed a translator between suppressed grief and surface calm, by the early, devastating discovery that their own emotional survival depended on correctly reading the emotional interior of the people around them. And that initiation, once complete, does not switch off. It becomes structure. It becomes identity. It becomes the architecture around which an entire life is organized, often at a cost that no one outside the architecture can see. Jung wrote, "The doctor is effective only when he himself is affected. Only the wounded physician heals." That sentence is not a compliment. It is a warning. Because the healer archetype, when it operates unconsciously, when the empath carries everyone's pain without understanding the mechanism or the cost, does not heal cleanly. It heals at the expense of the healer. It gives from a well that is never replenished. It transforms suffering in others while quietly accumulating it in the self. Over the next 25 minutes, we will open the healer archetype and look at what is actually inside it. Not what you've been told it means, what it actually does to the person who carries it. Now let's look at the wound beneath the healing. Every healer has an origin story they rarely tell accurately. Not because they lie, because the story has been rewritten by the archetype itself, transformed from a wound narrative into a purpose narrative so seamlessly that the original pain becomes invisible, reframed as the thing that made me who I am, rather than the thing that broke me in a specific way I have never fully repaired. In Jungian psychology, an archetype is not a metaphor. It is a psychic structure, a pattern of energy and meaning that exists in the collective unconscious and activates in the individual psyche when the conditions align. The wounded healer archetype activates under specific developmental conditions. A childhood environment where the child's emotional survival required them to develop a precocious capacity for reading, absorbing, and metabolizing the emotional states of others. Not because the child was naturally gifted, though they often were, because they had no other choice. The child who grows up in a family where a parent is depressed learns, at a very early age, to monitor the barometric pressure of the household. They learn which moods are approaching. They learn which version of the parent will appear at the dinner table. They learn to modulate their own emotional output based on the parent's current capacity, dimming their own joy when the parent cannot tolerate it, becoming invisible when the parent needs emptiness, becoming vibrantly present when the parent needs a reason to stay alive. This child is not being empathic, they are being strategic. They are doing what any intelligent organism does in an environment where the primary caregiver's emotional state is the single largest determinant of the child's safety. But here is where the archetype enters. The child who develops this extraordinary capacity for emotional attunement does not shed it when the original environment no longer requires it. The capacity persists, it expands, it becomes generalized, no longer directed at a single dangerous caregiver, but at every emotional field the growing person enters. The classroom, the friendship group, the romantic relationship, the workplace. Every room they enter, the ancient scanning program activates. Who here is in pain? Who here needs me? What must I feel in order for this environment to be safe? Jung described this pattern through the concept of the complex, an emotionally charged cluster of associations that forms around a core experience and operates autonomously, generating behavioral patterns that feel like personality but are actually automated responses to a foundational wound. The healer complex, when it forms, is remarkable in its sophistication. It does not simply drive the empath to help others. It organizes their entire relational identity around the function of healing, so completely that the empath comes to believe that this function is their identity, that without it, they are nothing. Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." The healer complex walks a razor edge between these two. The empath who carries everyone's pain genuinely loves. Their care is real. Their perception of suffering is accurate. Their desire to alleviate it is sincere. But underneath that love, powering the compulsive quality of the healing, the inability to not engage, to not absorb, to not intervene when pain is detected, is a shadow form of power. The power of being essential, the power of being the one who understands, the power that comes from occupying a position in every relational system that cannot easily be replaced. This is not a cynical observation, it is a structural one. The child who learned that their survival depended on their capacity to feel what others felt and respond accordingly is carrying, at the deepest level, a survival equation. If I stop being the healer, I stop being safe. And so the healing continues, not from abundance, not from choice, but from the oldest, most primal, most desperately sincere form of self-preservation. The philosophical dimension of this is crucial. The healer archetype does not emerge from strength. It emerges from the creative transformation of a wound into a function. And as long as that function operates without consciousness, without the empath understanding what drives it, what feeds it, and what it costs, it will deplete them. Because they are not giving from surplus, they are giving from the wound itself. Your gift was forged in the fire that burned you, and it is still burning. Let's talk about something the empath's mind avoids but their body cannot escape. There is a physical cost to carrying other people's pain, not a metaphorical cost, not an energetic cost in the vague, unmeasurable sense. A biological, neurological, measurable cost that the deeply sensitive person's body is paying every single day, and that the mind, organized around the healer identity, systematically denies. Jung was ahead of his time in recognizing the psychosomatic dimension of psychological life. He understood that the psyche and the body are not separate systems communicating across a divide, but a single system expressing itself through two registers. What the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge, the body holds. What the ego represses, the nervous system expresses. The empath who carries the unprocessed emotional material of other people is not merely experiencing psychological fatigue. They are subjecting their physiological system to a continuous load of unmetabolized effect, emotional content that enters their awareness, activates their stress response, and because it does not belong to them and therefore cannot be resolved by them, remains in their system as unfinished somatic business. The chronic fatigue that does not respond to rest. The autoimmune conditions that seem to arrive from nowhere. The digestive disturbances that no dietary change fully resolves. The headaches that move through the skull like weather systems. The vague, persistent sense of heaviness in the chest that the empath attributes to their own sadness, but that is, often, the accumulated weight of everyone else's sadness held in a body that was never designed to hold it indefinitely. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." For the healer archetype, this principle operates with devastating specificity. The legitimate suffering, the empath's own pain, their own unaddressed wound, their own grief and anger and unfulfilled need, is perpetually deferred in favor of attending to the suffering of others. The neurosis that substitutes for it is not dramatic. It is mundane. It is the chronic, low-grade, always present physical malaise that the empath has learned to live inside, as if it were normal. As if the permanent state of mild to moderate depletion were simply the cost of being who they are. As if the body's increasingly urgent signals, the exhaustion, the inflammation, the sleep that does not restore, were background noise rather than alarm bells. The Jungian framework identifies what is happening here with characteristic precision. The body is holding the shadow. The emotional material that the empath's conscious identity, organized around care, around healing, around being the one who carries, cannot admit, the body stores. The anger at being perpetually drained that the empath's self-concept does not permit. The grief of never being held with the same quality of attention they offer to everyone else. The simple, primal hunger to put the weight down and rest. Not for an evening, not for a vacation, but in the fundamental sense of resting from the function itself. There is a philosophical dimension here that cuts deep. The body does not lie. The mind constructs narratives, noble narratives about purpose and calling and the beauty of service. And those narratives may be true, but the body registers the cost without narrative, without interpretation, without the ego's capacity to reframe suffering as meaning. The body simply records, this weight arrived, this weight was not discharged, this weight accumulates. The system is now carrying more than it was designed to carry. The empath who begins to listen to the body, not as an inconvenience to be managed, but as the most honest reporting system they have, encounters information that the healer identity would prefer to avoid. The information is, you are spending biological resources you are not replacing. The exchange rate between the healing you provide and the toll your body pays is not sustainable. The narrative of noble service is beautiful. The body's ledger is not. This is not a call to stop caring. It is a call to include the body in the conversation. To recognize that the wounded healer who never attends to the wound, who heals others from a bleeding interior, is not performing an act of love. They are performing an act of slow self-destruction disguised as love. And the body knows this before the mind will admit it. The body keeps the score the mind refuses to read. Here is the room most healers never enter, not because it is locked, because they have been trained, by life, by identity, by the archetype itself, to walk past it. To attend to every other room in the house first. To organize their entire interior life around the care of others in such a way that the one room containing their own deepest truth remains the last place they look. The healer's shadow is not cruelty. It is not indifference. The healer's shadow is need. Specifically, the need to be needed. The need for the role. The need for the particular form of significance that comes from being the one who holds the room together, who carries what others cannot, who remains when everyone else has left. This need is not separate from the love, it is woven through it. And that is precisely what makes it so difficult to see, because seeing it would require the empath to acknowledge that their most generous impulses contain, at their core, a hunger that has nothing to do with generosity. Jung's psychology of the shadow is not about exposing hidden evil. It is about reclaiming what has been exiled from consciousness. The desires, needs, and impulses that were deemed incompatible with the person's self-concept and therefore sent underground. For the healer, the shadow contains everything that contradicts the healer identity, the desire to be taken care of, the resentment that builds when care is not reciprocated, the fantasy of simply walking away, the secret, shameful, almost unthinkable wish to be weak, to collapse, to be the one who needs rescuing for once, instead of the one who always, always, always does the rescuing. These shadow desires are not pathological, they are human. They are the natural, predictable, psychologically inevitable consequence of a life organized around the suppression of personal need in favor of attending to the needs of others. They are the psyche's way of maintaining balance, of insisting, through subterranean channels, that the needs that were exiled from the surface still exist and still require attention. Jung wrote, "I'd rather be whole than good." This is perhaps the most revolutionary sentence in all of Jungian psychology, and for the healer archetype, it is the most dangerous, because the healer's entire identity is organized around being good, being needed, being the one who gives. To choose wholeness over goodness means to admit that the giving is not purely generous, that the healing is not purely altruistic, that beneath the beautiful, exhausting, self-consuming act of carrying everyone's pain, there is a person who wants to put the weight down, who wants to be seen not for what they provide, but for who they are when they are not providing anything, who wants, and this is the shadow's deepest and most terrifying whisper, to be loved for existing, not for performing. The philosophical dimension of the healer's shadow work is this: As long as the empath derives their sense of identity from the healing function, they are not free. They are bound, not by chains, but by purpose. And purpose, when it becomes compulsive rather than chosen, is as effective a prison as any external constraint. The empath who heals because they cannot not heal is not exercising a gift. They are obeying a complex. They are replaying the childhood survival strategy in an adult context with the same underlying logic. If I stop being useful, I will be abandoned. If I stop carrying the pain, I will be alone. The shadow work is the process of bringing these equations into the light, not to destroy the healing capacity. That capacity is real, it is beautiful, it deserves to exist, but to separate it from the survival fear that currently powers it. To transform healing from a compulsion into a choice. To make the empath's care for others something they offer from fullness rather than something they perform from fear. The need you hid inside the giving is the same need everyone else carries openly. It was never shameful, it was only hidden. There is a version of the Chiron myth that is rarely told. In the standard version, Chiron suffers eternally, the immortal healer who can never heal himself. But in certain tellings, a resolution comes. Prometheus, the titan who stole fire for humanity and was punished with daily torment, is bound to a rock, his liver eaten by an eagle each day, regenerated each night. Chiron, after centuries of his own unending wound, offers a trade with the gods, his immortality for Prometheus's freedom. He chooses to die, to relinquish the eternal life that kept him in perpetual pain, and in doing so, liberates both Prometheus and himself. The healer chooses to end the pattern, not by stopping to heal, by relinquishing the immortality of the role, the invulnerability, the self-sufficiency, the I can carry anythingness that has been both gift and prison. By choosing, finally, to be mortal, to be limited, to be a person with a wound that matters rather than a function with a wound that serves. In Jungian terms, this is the moment of individuation for the healer archetype. The moment when the empath stops identifying with the healing function and begins to identify with the whole self, including the parts that are not strong, not giving, not useful. The parts that are tired and angry and hungry and afraid. The parts that the healer identity has been working overtime to conceal. Jung described individuation as the process by which a person becomes undivided, not by eliminating their contradictions, but by holding them consciously. The healer who has individuated does not stop caring. They care differently. They care from a place that includes their own need rather than excludes it. They care with the knowledge that their compassion for others and their compassion for themselves are not competing resources but the same resource, flowing in different directions. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the healer, becoming who they truly are means something specific and uncomfortable. Becoming someone who can receive, not as a technique, not as self-care, as a fundamental restructuring of the psychic economy, an acknowledgement that the one-directional flow of emotional energy that has characterized their entire relational life is not generosity, it is imbalance. And imbalance, however nobly intended, eventually collapses. The healer who learns to receive discovers something unexpected. They discover that the healing capacity does not diminish when it is balanced by receiving. It amplifies. Because the healer who is internally resourced, who is held, nourished, attended to with the same quality of care they offer others, brings a fundamentally different quality of presence to their healing work. Not the trembling, depleted, running on empty presence of the chronically drained empath, but the grounded, resourced, steady presence of someone who has been to the well and drunk before offering water to others. This is the final revolution. The healer who heals themselves is not abandoning their purpose. They are fulfilling it. Because the purpose was never simply to carry other people's pain, the purpose, if the archetype is understood fully, in its complete Jungian context, is to demonstrate, through lived example, that the wound and the gift are the same thing, and that the only healing that is genuinely sustainable is the one that flows in both directions. The Chiron who traded his immortality for mortality, who chose to be finite, limited, human, was not committing suicide. He was choosing wholeness over function. life over role. And in that choice, he freed not only himself, but the other being bound to perpetual suffering alongside him. The people around you are Prometheus. They are bound to their own patterns partly because the healer in their life has been so reliably, so compulsively, so selflessly available that they have never had to develop their own capacity for self-rescue. When you choose to be mortal, to have limits, to need care, to occasionally say, "not today," you free them to find resources they didn't know they had. The healer who finally receives is not breaking the gift, they are completing it. Stay here for one more moment. If you have spent years, decades, being the one who carries, the one who translates pain into understanding, the one who enters every room and immediately locates the suffering, the one everyone leans on and no one leans toward, I want to sit with what that has cost you. Not in theory, in your body, in your sleep, in the quiet corners of your life where no one is watching, and the healer mask is off, and the person underneath is simply, achingly, profoundly tired. That tiredness is not a failure. It is the body's honest testimony that something has been flowing out for a very long time, and very little has been flowing back in. Not because you are unloved, but because the system you built, the role you inhabit, the identity you organized around the function of healing, has no inlet. It is an open channel pointed outward. And no open channel, however deep, can pour forever without being replenished. Jung spent his final years working on a concept he called the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites within the psyche. The union of light and shadow, masculine and feminine, giving and receiving, strength and vulnerability. He believed this union was not just a therapeutic goal, but the fundamental purpose of psychological life. That every human being is moving, whether they know it or not, toward the internal integration that makes genuine wholeness possible. For the healer archetype, the conjunctio means marrying the capacity to give with the willingness to receive. The ability to carry with the courage to put the weight down. The depth of perception with the discipline of boundary. Not as a balance sheet, as an integration, the recognition that giving and receiving are not opposites, but phases of the same respiration. That the healer who exhales forever without inhaling is not generous. They are suffocating. This channel exists for the people who are doing this work. The quiet, difficult, deeply personal work of becoming whole rather than merely useful. Of placing their own healing on the same shelf as the healing they give to others, not beneath it, not after it, alongside it. If this reached the part of you that has been waiting to be reached, subscribe. The depth continues. The work continues. And the healer who begins to heal themselves changes not only their own life, but the lives of everyone they touch. You are allowed to put the weight down.